is joining us to break it down for us. It's great to have you with us, Mr. Sahoo. In your opinion, as far as your understanding of Indian elections goes, how important is the role of money in ensuring voter turnout? Mr. Sahoo.
Hi, Vikram. Money plays a very critical role, and it's not just about India. Across most of the democracies, just barring maybe some Western, I would say European, the Nordic nations where money plays a minimal role, but all other democracies, India, Brazil, Indonesia, US, you look at every democracy, it plays a massive role. And in terms of voter turnout, I would say that I think money certainly plays a crucial role, and India's especially 2019 and 2024 elections, where in fact, we did a study recently about cost of politics, and we spoke to a lot of MP, MLAs, and number of voters across many regions of India. And what we found out is that one of the key reasons that motivates voters to come to vote in large number is one of them is the vote buying, the trends of vote buying. Parties are, distributing money, which is now becoming an open case now. Earlier, it was happening in a very sort of subtle underneath, way. Now it's openly, brazenly, political parties. There is a competitive vote buying kind of thing happening, and that brings and then of course you have welfare scheme freebies that also have become major attraction, and voter also comes in groups actually to vote for different political party. So all that, in terms of vote buying, freebies, all that means, there is a huge amount of money involved in the elections and voter turnout consequently.
Yes, Mr. Sahoo, and so that phrase, money wins elections, that has been widely debated, but now at this point in time, when we're talking about USAID, that India funding row, it's taken a serious turn. President Donald Trump calls it a kickback scheme, and India's Ministry of External Affairs is raising concerns about what they call deeply troubling foreign intervention. How do you see these allegations in this broader context that we are talking about of foreign influence in Indian elections?
I think we should not actually give a sort of, as you said correctly, disproportionate sort of weightage to this, foreign actors influencing Indian election. That too, especially money. I would say a lot of the claim would be far more stronger if you take into the in terms of disinformation, digital influence, which happens, starting with US election in 2016, where you had the Russian angle, and then now Chinese, Iran angles. So those sort of things, disinformation, using AI, deepfakes, those things where foreign actors are actually powerfully, trying to set the outcome of the many elections in Europe, even in America also, this time around the Russian, the Chinese, this thing they tried. But I'm saying in terms of money, if you just take this example of 21 million US dollar for a country of our size, it's just unbelievable how it can really influence 140 crore or 150 crores rupees for a country in just to cite you in the last 2024 elections. As for the Center for Media Studies and Analysis, which is very conservative estimate, nearly 60,000 crores were spent by political parties and candidates in the elections. And there you just compare 140 crore. So even if it's true, it's just drop in the ocean. So I don't think for a country of our size, we should be talking about this issue. Maybe Maldives, maybe Sri Lanka, maybe Nepal, where 21 million US dollar can make a lot of hay. And we have seen in Bangladesh, US interference and all that, even in its involvement, alleged involvement in the protest, student protest.
Right.
But India, I think, is a different 960, more than 960 million voters. I mean, it's a continent size. So 21
That's
million
why at the outset I was laying out the numbers. Yes, at the outset I was laying out the numbers because the scale that we are talking about when it comes to elections in India, that's huge. And like you mentioned in the last election, 60,000 crore rupees is a staggering number. And this is something that we saw in 2019. But yes, and that's the conservative estimate that you're saying. But, Mr. Sahoo, foreign funding in political and policy ecosystems, that's not a new concern. This controversy, though, has reignited that debate. How does India's approach to regulating external financial influence compare with other democracies? Do you see a need for stricter safeguards at all? A clearer stance by the government as well in clarifying how this has actually happened?
That's a very good question, and that's where I think the debate should be. It's not about that USAID, which allegedly given 21 million and all that. We should be debating. We should be debating the role of foreign money that is flowing into our democratic system, especially after that dilution of FCR regulations in 2017, and that resulted in that case of electoral bonds, which was a scandal of great proportion, where almost 99% of donors are actually basically wealthy people. They are basically business from the private sector who are funding to different political parties. So I think this is where, and then after FCR thing was diluted in 2017, which allowed foreign companies with joint venture with Indian companies can donate also through electoral bond routes. That actually greatly threatened our democracy, and luckily that Supreme Court finally put its foot down and made it sort of illegal. But still, then it's open question, because FCR allows foreign companies to also fund our political parties, and we simply don't know actually who is funding. There could be Chinese companies, there could be Russian companies who will have different sort of ulterior motive.
Quite right.
And
Quite
today,
right.
at a time of geopolitics where we face so much of competition and so much of conflict with China, what is the
Yes.
kind of safety valve we have actually to check the influence of Chinese money flowing into our system? Because China has a huge business presence in our country. So I think we should be
That's right.
talking about those regulation and plugging those loopholes than talking about this 20 million kind of tamasha.
So that you think is inconsequential, but we have to address the broader concerns, and these concerns have been growing about foreign money in elections, also both in India and also globally, Mr. Sahu. In the US, of course, Trump and Musk, they've spoken about foreign funding in campaigns. India has tightened rules on electoral bonds, you brought that up, and also NGO financing. But you tell me, in your assessment, how vulnerable is India's electoral process to external influences at this stage? You mentioned China and the way in which that money could be in the system, and probably is, but tell us exactly in a nutshell how you see that process of elections getting influenced by external forces.
I think the number one thing we have to do is we have to actually amend the FCR rules, which allows, foreign, the joint venture, with Indian companies, those people who can actually fund. I think that we need to be really addressed immediately. And then second issue is about we have to strengthen our enforcement mechanism. Election Commission, for all its great showing about conducting election, other thing, it does nothing in terms of enforcement. About the violators, people who brazenly violate. Number of times they have been. It has been brought out. Mining company with foreign sort of linkages, other thing, have been almost bankrolling political parties in elections. We have seen it in case of Karnataka and several states in Odisha and many other states where mining barons actually literally fund the entire elections, and a lot of them have foreign sort of connections. So I'm saying, do we have sort of mechanism where we can regulate their funding? So I think number two is we have to regulate the corporate funding, because the business influence to politics all over the world, and we are seeing it in great display in US, where a billionaire Elon Musk is playing such a large disproportionate role in shaping US politics today, and
Yes,
he funded several hundreds million to Trump's campaign. So I'm saying that sort of threat is real because we are
correct. But
largely, almost every election we are seeing oligarchization of Indian elections, oligarchs who are literally
yes,
controlling your political system by other means, and that must stop by we have to regulate the corporate funding, because we had earlier 7.5% kind of limit was there for companies which are making profit under
yes,
foreign companies act. Now that has been also removed. So in a sense you
correct,
have removed all the sort of limitations and whatever checks and
correct.
allowed those sort of companies, and those companies have a clear sort of collaboration and sort of partnership with many foreign companies. So I'm saying
Yes, but Mr.
we have
Yes,
to have strengthen the regulations. strengthen also
Correct.
election commissions to become, far more stringent with, violators. And then the third, I think it also requires, political parties to also be responsible, because end of
But
the day,
these
they
are
are
the
the key
political
pillars of the
parties.
democracy.
But Mr. Sahu, these are political
Sorry, you said
parties.
something?
Some of them. No, I was just saying that these Indian political parties, there are allegations that they get foreign donations. There are businesses, of course, like you mentioned, there are think tanks as well. So they are contributing and they could shape election outcomes. How serious is that concern? What global precedents do we have in trying to control it?
I think, see, think tanks, those research organizations really cannot actually influence the outcome of Indian elections, because it's because of the sheer size actually, and then diversity. But political parties which are actually, getting a lot of donations, and you have today a situation in which there are a handful of political parties which almost get most of the donations. They are from internal, from outside, and that sort of it creates a kind of huge disparities, and that is where, that makes democracy poorer. And unless we regulate and, really find out from which source these donations are flowing to different few, handful of political parties, we will
Yes.
not be able to safeguard the democracy. And this also creates a major problem of, in terms of level playing field for many other new entrants, or, small or medium parties. They simply cannot compete. They are actually literally out of the system. And because you need a minimum threshold to fight elections, minimum threshold of money is required. So I think it's a good time that we need to talk about, state funding or public funding of elections, create a kind of, national pool,
So on these,
and, that would create a equity.
so
And along with that, we have to, stop the, corporate funding of business funding the elections, like many countries, UK, Canada, you look at Japan, many countries have adopted, because earlier they used to have scam and scandals, including several of their prime minister used to be in jail. Actually, in Japan, you would have actually seen. So all that
yes.
stopped because they banned, and they created another mechanism where, political parties can be funded, and, candidates can be funded, and those candidates who do not come from the money background can actually have a fighting chance.
So that's what I was saying, that there are new funding models that are emerging. There is the corporate-backed super PSEs, the political action committees in the US. Of course, we've had our own electoral bond
That's a bad
system. I don't
example.
know. Sorry, what?
Super PSC is a bad example, and it is one of the
Bad
worst
example,
form
you're
of
saying.
political funding here, because that is
So
where the
how? So
corporate, the billionaires actually come into here. And because US Supreme Court has also removed that, whatever limit they had, it has now become a floodgates of big money into the electoral system of US, which has
yes,
actually brought so many elements now you are witnessing. We should
yes,
not
Mr.
really
Sahu, but
emulate US.
so
US is the worst
yes,
example in terms of political funding.
worst example you're calling it. But then in India, is transparency still a pipe dream? As we wind down this discussion, because money plays such a crucial role in elections, like you raised the point, where does it leave the smaller parties, the independent candidates? What happens to grassroots democracy? So one wonders if Indian democracy has to thrive and not have an oligarchic model, like you're saying, Mr. Sahu. Do tell us exactly what do you see working in the Indian context?
I think in Indian context, what actually holds, some sort of hope is that, that the digital space, the internet, this has opened some sort of huge, I think, options for a lot of political parties, and a lot of candidates, even coming from very sort of humble background, are able to raise, funds to support their campaign. And we have seen in the last elections, several, dozens of them were able to raise funds through cloud funding and other things, almost like, following what Obama did during his campaign. So I think those
Right,
things are also taking shape. But then
right.
the amount of money, what we actually found during our recent study, that a candidate needs to actually put up a decent, sort of fight for a Lok Sabha seat. You are talking
Yes.
about almost every Lok Sabha seat has more than nearly 2 million, voters. look at
That's
our
right.
size actually, and it's just compare that with United Kingdom. It will be almost
Yes,
20 times bigger than
that's true.
size of their house of people. So I'm saying a
Yes,
huge size actually, and that requires minimum money. So we found out even in the poorest state, like some of them
yes.
from Bihar, 7 to 8 crore
Mhm.
you have to spend minimum to stand a fighting, have a fighting chance.
Correct,
So where
correct.
do you get that kind of money? So I think it's a
That's
serious
right.
issue, and this is where I think we
It
have
is
to
a
talk
serious
about
issue. We haven't
state
been able
funding.
to plug the roads. Yes, yes. No, Mr. Sahu, this conversation, of course, underscores how money, whether it's domestic or foreign, it's increasingly become the fuel that really drives elections. Yet the key takeaway is that money alone does not guarantee victory. There is voter perception, there is ideology, there is ground level mobilization. All of these factors remain critical. But now, as India's elections become more expensive, the risk of an uneven playing field is growing. The challenge, of course, is clear. Can electoral finance reforms keep pace with the rising tide of big money in
Wanted to,
politics? Yes, but unfortunately, I'm afraid we're
follow.
running out of
We are
time.
actually just wanted to flag 2024 elections, Lok Sabha elections.
Yes,
We analyzed 93% of those who have got elected are crorepati's. And
right.
we did a sort of an analysis that we found nearly 20% those who are above crores assets
Yes,
have
yes,
more than they have almost 5 times more chances to win the elections than those who are below the 1 crore rate. So you can easily see
correct.
the role of money, and that's where
Yes,
self-financing candidates are actually increasing. Almost it's becoming an auction to get party tickets. So that's really
exactly.
distort the democracy.
It distorts democracy, and something that we need to look into very deeply, and whether regulations, etc., are going to play the key role, and who's going to be the prime mover in this within our entire political system. That remains to be the challenge. It's something that we're watching very closely. But Mr. Sahu, appreciate you joining us, sharing your insights and your perspective on this. Thanks very much. And we'll wrap up this special edition of
Thank you.
Business at 9.
Thank you.
We're talking about electoral politics in India and how that face is changing. We'll continue monitoring it. I'm Vikram Oza from me and the team. Thank you very much for joining us. Good night.